My sister announced at Thanksgiving dinner that she was pregnant with my husband's child. The silence lasted 5 seconds before my father threw his glass against the wall. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. There are moments in life when time splits cleanly into before and after. Mine happened over roasted turkey and mashed potatoes, with my mother's hand-embroidered tablecloth underneath and the scent of cinnamon candles in the air. The moment my sister opened her mouth, smiled that nervous, triumphant smile, and said the words that would detonate my entire existence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where all good tragedies start, at the beginning when everything still made sense. My name is Elena, and for 32 years, I thought I understood how the world worked. You worked hard. You were kind. You built something beautiful with your own 2 hands, and the universe rewarded you. That's what my mother always said anyway, as she hung laundry in our backyard or rolled pie dough on Sunday afternoons. She believed in fairness like some people believe in God. I inherited that faith from her, wore it like armor, and it protected me exactly until it didn't. I grew up in a pale yellow house in Connecticut with white shutters and a maple tree in the front yard. My sister Amber was born 3 years after me. Arriving in a storm of attention that never quite dissipated, she was the beautiful one, the one strangers smiled at in grocery stores, the one who got lead roles in school plays without auditioning. I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades, the one who helped Mom with dinner while Amber practiced her dance routines in the living room mirror. Our parents never said they loved one of us more. They didn't have to. It was written in the way Dad's eyes lit up when Amber walked into a room. The way Mom always made excuses for her missed curfews, her failed classes, her string of dramatic breakups. Meanwhile, I colored inside the lines, made the honor roll, and learned early that being reliable meant being invisible. I don't say this with bitterness, or at least I didn't used to. It was just the way things were. The roles we were assigned in the family play. Amber was the star. I was the stage manager, making sure the show ran smoothly, that everyone else got to shine. And I was good at it. So good that I built an entire life around that skill. I met David when I was 24, at a friend's wedding where I was helping coordinate the reception because the actual coordinator had food poisoning. He was the groom's college roommate, tall and solid with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he laughed. He found me in the kitchen, stress-eating cake frosting straight from the piping bag, and instead of judging me, he grabbed a spoon and joined in. We got married 2 years later in that same yellow house's backyard, under the maple tree that had grown tall enough to provide actual shade by then. Amber was my maid of honor because that's what you do when you're the older sister. She wore a pale pink dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, and she cried during my vows. Real tears. Not the pretty kind actresses produce on command. I remember thinking that maybe she really was happy for me, that maybe we'd finally moved past the strange competition that had defined our childhood. David and I bought a small colonial in the suburbs, the kind with a red door and window boxes I filled with pansies every spring. He worked in finance, something with numbers and spreadsheets that I never fully understood, but that paid well enough for me to quit my office job and focus on making our house a home. I learned to cook from YouTube videos and cooking blogs. I planted a garden. I hosted dinner parties where I made everything from scratch, including the bread. I became exactly the kind of wife my mother had been, the kind I thought I was supposed to be. And I loved it. God help me, I genuinely loved it. I loved the routine of David coming home at 6:30, loosening his tie as he walked through the door, the way he'd wrap his arms around me from behind while I stirred pasta sauce. I loved our Sunday mornings reading the paper in bed, our Friday night tradition of ordering Thai food and watching whatever mindless action movie was streaming. I loved the life we built together, brick by careful brick, into something solid and real. We tried for a baby for 3 years. 3 years of tracking ovulation and timing sex like a military operation and crying in bathroom stalls when my period arrived right on schedule, mocking me with its punctuality. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with either of us. Just one of those things, they said, as if that explained anything. As if randomness was supposed to comfort me. David was patient through all of it. He held me when I sobbed after another negative pregnancy test. He researched fertility treatments and was ready to start IVF whenever I was. He never once made me feel like I was failing him, even though I felt like I was failing at the one thing women are supposedly built to do. Meanwhile, Amber drifted through her 20s like a leaf on water, moving from job to job, relationship to relationship, city to city. She'd call Mom from Los Angeles or Austin or Portland, always somewhere new, always chasing some dream that evaporated as soon as she got close. She worked as a yoga instructor, then a bartender, then tried to launch a lifestyle blog that never got past 3 posts. She dated a musician, then a startup founder, then a guy who lived in a van and sold handmade jewelry at farmers markets. My parents worried about her constantly. Every phone call from Mom included updates on Amber's latest crisis, her latest reinvention, her latest heartbreak. And every time I was expected to be understanding, to be supportive, to be the stable one who had her life figured out and could therefore afford to be generous. I was generous. I sent money when she needed rent. I let her crash in our guest room for 3 months when she came back from Seattle with no plan and no savings. I listened to her cry about the men who didn't appreciate her, the jobs that didn't fulfill her, the universe that wasn't giving her what she deserved. And I never once complained because that wasn't my role. My role was to be the rock, the anchor, the responsible older sister who had everything under control. 2 years ago, Amber moved back to Connecticut. She said she was tired of running, ready to put down roots, ready to finally grow up at 29. My parents were thrilled. Mom practically threw a party. Dad helped her find an apartment 10 minutes from our house. And I, ever the dutiful big sister, welcomed her home with open arms and a casserole. She got a job at a boutique fitness studio teaching Pilates. She actually stuck with it, which was novel for her. She started dating a guy named Chris who worked in real estate and seemed stable enough. She came to our house for dinner every other week, sometimes more. She helped me plant tulip bulbs in October. She and David bonded over their shared love of true crime podcasts. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way Amber always seemed to know when David would be home from work. The way she'd show up in workout clothes that were just a little too tight. A little too revealing for someone who was supposedly just coming from teaching a class. The way David started staying late at the office more often, missing our Friday night dinners for conference calls that always seemed to happen at 7 in the evening. But I didn't see it. I was too busy being the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. Too busy making sure everyone else was happy to notice that my own happiness was built on foundations that were already crumbling. Thanksgiving this year fell on a crisp November day with leaves still clinging stubbornly to branches and the kind of blue sky that makes you believe in fresh starts. We were hosting at our house for the first time because Mom's kitchen was being renovated and Dad's back wasn't up for all the preparation. I'd been cooking for 2 days straight. Turkey brining in the fridge. Sweet potato casserole assembled and ready to bake. Green bean casserole made from scratch, none of that canned soup nonsense. Cranberry sauce with orange zest and a hint of cinnamon. Pumpkin pie and apple pie and a pecan pie because Dad loved pecan pie. The house smelled like butter and sage and everything good about autumn. I'd set the table with our wedding china, the pattern I'd agonized over for weeks before registering for it. The hand-embroidered tablecloth Mom had made for me as a wedding gift, cream-colored linen with tiny autumn leaves stitched around the border, candles and hurricane glasses, a centerpiece I'd made from branches and dried hydrangeas and small pumpkins from the farmer's market. It was perfect. I'd made it perfect. David had been distant that morning, distracted in a way that made me think he was stressed about work. He'd barely touched the breakfast I'd made, claimed he wasn't hungry, wanted to save room for the big meal. He kept checking his phone, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against the counter. When I asked if everything was okay, he nodded too quickly and kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. I didn't worry. I was too busy basting the turkey and whipping cream and making sure every detail was exactly right. My parents arrived at 2, Mom carrying her famous rolls in a basket covered with a checked cloth. Dad bearing wine and complaining cheerfully about traffic even though they'd only driven 15 minutes. They hugged me and complimented the house and asked what they could do to help. I sent Dad to open wine and put Mom to work mashing potatoes because she always made them better than I could. Some magic ratio of butter to cream that I'd never quite mastered. Amber arrived at 2:30, which was late enough to make a subtle entrance, but not so late that anyone could complain. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater dress that hugged her figure and brown boots that came up to her knees. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. She looked, as always, like she'd stepped out of a catalog. She hugged everyone, complimented my cooking, handed me a bottle of wine I knew she'd grabbed from the grocery store 5 minutes before arriving. David poured her a glass of white wine. Their fingers touched when he handed it to her. I saw it happen. I saw the way their eyes met for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and I felt something cold move through my chest. Some animal instinct that I immediately pushed down because I was being ridiculous. I was being paranoid. I was being the kind of insecure wife I'd promised myself I'd never become. We sat down to eat at 4 o'clock exactly. The turkey golden and perfect in the center of the table. Steam rising from dishes of vegetables and stuffing and all the abundance of a proper Thanksgiving feast. Dad carved the turkey with the electric knife he insisted on using every year, despite Mom's complaints about the noise. We passed plates and filled glasses, and the conversation flowed easily, comfortably, the way it does with people who've shared thousands of meals together. I felt happy. Genuinely, completely happy. I looked around the table at my family, at my husband, at this life I'd built, and I felt like maybe all those years of trying, all those years of being good and responsible and doing everything right had finally paid off. This was my reward. This warmth, this love, this sense of everything being exactly where it should be. Amber ate quickly, barely touching her wine. I noticed but didn't think much of it. She'd always had a small appetite, always picked at her food while staying impossibly thin in that way that used to make me jealous when we were teenagers. She kept glancing at David. He kept not looking at her. And there was something in the air, some electrical charge I couldn't quite name, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. We were halfway through the meal when Amber put down her fork. Her hands were shaking slightly, I noticed. She cleared her throat. Everyone looked at her because that's what we did when Amber wanted attention. We looked. She smiled. It was a strange smile. Nervous and excited and something else I couldn't identify. Triumphant, maybe. Or desperate. Her eyes were too bright, her cheeks flushed. "I have an announcement," she said. Mom's face lit up immediately. "Oh, honey, what is it?" Dad lowered his wine glass, looking at Amber with that expression of fond indulgence he always wore when she spoke. David went completely still beside me. I felt it. The way every muscle in his body tensed. The way he stopped breathing for just a second. My hand was resting on my napkin in my lap, and I gripped it harder without knowing why. "I'm pregnant," Amber said. There was a beat of confused silence. Not the shocked kind. Not yet. Just the brief pause of people processing unexpected information, recalibrating. Mom's mouth opened, forming the beginning of a squeal of delight. Dad started to smile. I felt my own face arranging itself into an expression of surprise and happiness, because that's what you did when someone announced a pregnancy, even if it was unexpected, even if Amber had never mentioned wanting children, even if she'd broken up with Chris 3 months ago. And then Amber kept talking. "With David's baby," she said. "We're having a baby together." The silence that followed was absolute. Not just quiet, but the complete absence of sound. As if the world itself had stopped spinning, had held its breath, had frozen in the moment before impact. I could hear the candles flickering. I could hear my own heartbeat suddenly too loud in my ears. I could hear absolutely nothing from anyone else at the table because we had all become statues, suspended in the second before everything shattered. 5 seconds. That's how long it lasted. 5 seconds that stretched into eternity. 5 seconds that allowed my brain to process what my ears had heard. 5 seconds for the meaning to sink in, to spread like ice water through my veins, to transform my entire reality into something unrecognizable. 5 seconds, and then my father threw his wine glass against the wall. The crash was extraordinary. Crystal exploding against pale blue paint, red wine splashing like blood across the wall, dripping down toward the baseboards. Shards glittering on the hardwood floor like broken stars. The sound broke the spell, unfroze us all, and suddenly everyone was moving, talking, shouting. "What did you just say?" Dad's voice was thunder. I'd never heard him sound like that. Not even when I'd wrecked his car when I was 17. Not even when Amber had dropped out of college. His face was dark red, his hands gripping the edge of the table like he needed it to keep him upright. Mom made a sound that wasn't quite a word, more like air being forced from lungs, like the noise someone makes when they've been punched in the stomach. I sat perfectly still, my hands still in my lap, my napkin still clutched between white knuckles. I looked at David. He was staring at his plate. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping. His eyes closed as if he couldn't bear to see what was happening. I looked at Amber. She was crying now, tears streaming down her perfect face, but her chin was lifted, defiant, her shoulders squared. She looked at me directly for the first time since she'd started speaking, and in her eyes I saw something I'd seen our entire lives together. That need to win, to be chosen, to be the one who mattered most. That desperate hunger for attention, for love, for validation that she'd spent 3 decades trying to fill with whatever and whoever would give it to her. She'd taken my husband, and she'd announced it at Thanksgiving dinner like it was good news, like it was something to celebrate, like she was the victim here and we should all be happy for her. "Elena," she said, her voice breaking on my name. "I didn't mean for this to happen. We didn't mean for this to happen. But we fell in love and we're going to be a family, and I thought you should know. I thought we should be honest." Honest. The word almost made me laugh. There was nothing honest about any of this. Nothing honest about the way they'd been sneaking around behind my back. Nothing honest about the way David had kissed me goodbye that morning, had told me he loved me while his mistress carried his child. Nothing honest about my sister sitting at my table, eating food I'd spent days preparing, wearing the smile of someone who thought she deserved sympathy. "How long?" My voice surprised me. It sounded calm, almost detached, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who wasn't currently experiencing the complete destruction of everything they'd believed was real. David finally looked at me. His eyes were red. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Didn't answer. 6 months, Amber said quietly. It started 6 months ago. 6 months, half a year. All those dinners she'd come to. All those times she'd helped me in the garden. All those conversations about her life, her problems, her dreams. All those times David had worked late, had been distant, had been somewhere else even when he was sitting right beside me. 6 months of lies, of betrayal, of my husband and my sister looking at each other when they thought I wasn't watching, of them laughing together at my stupidity, my blindness, my pathetic faith that the people I loved wouldn't destroy me. Mom was sobbing now, her hands covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Dad stood up so violently his chair fell backward, hitting the floor with a bang that made everyone jump. "Get out," he said to David. His voice was quiet now, which was somehow worse than the shouting. Quiet and hard and completely cold. "Get out of this house. Get out right now before I do something I regret." David stood. He looked at me one more time, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something, like there were words that could possibly make this better. I stared back at him. This man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years. This man I'd built a life with. This man I'd trusted with every piece of my heart. He looked like a stranger. He looked like someone I'd never met. He left. Didn't take his jacket, didn't say goodbye. Just walked out the front door and left it open behind him, letting November air pour into the house, cold and sharp and clean. Amber started to stand too, but Dad pointed at her, his fingers shaking. "You stay," he said. "You owe your sister more than running away." So she stayed. She sat back down in her chair, still crying, her hands resting on her stomach in a gesture that was either protective or performative. I couldn't tell which. Maybe both. I still hadn't moved. I sat at the head of my perfect table, surrounded by my perfect meal, in my perfect house, and I felt nothing. No, that's not quite right. I felt everything, every emotion simultaneously. So much that they canceled each other out and left me hollow, empty. A shell of a person watching her life implode from somewhere very far away. "Elena," Mom said, reaching across the table toward me. "Honey, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We had no idea." I looked at her hand, outstretched, offering comfort. I looked at my father, his face still dark with rage. I looked at my sister, crying at my table, pregnant with my husband's child, waiting for me to react, to scream, to cry, to give her the drama she'd always craved. And I felt something then. Finally. Not grief, not yet. Something hotter, sharper. Something that had been buried under years of being good, of being understanding, of being the responsible one who made excuses for everyone else's behavior. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment to claw its way to the surface. I stood up. Carefully, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. I picked up my wine glass, still full because I'd been too busy serving everyone else to drink my own. I walked around the table to where Amber sat. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, mascara running down her cheeks. Waiting for forgiveness, maybe. Or condemnation. Waiting for me to play my role, to be the bigger person, to somehow make this okay. I poured my wine over her head. It wasn't dramatic or violent. I did it slowly, carefully, watching the red liquid soak into her perfect blonde hair, run down her perfect face, stain her perfect cream dress. She gasped and sputtered, but she didn't move. Just sat there and took it, like maybe she thought she deserved it, or maybe she was too shocked to react. When the glass was empty, I set it down gently on the table. "Get out of my house," I said. Still calm, still detached. "Get out and don't ever come back." Amber stood, dripping wine onto my floor, onto Mom's hand-embroidered tablecloth. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. What could she say? What was there to say? She left. I heard the front door close behind her, heard her car start, heard her drive away. And then it was just me and my parents in the ruins of Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by all that food I'd made, all that effort, all that love poured into creating something beautiful that had been destroyed in seconds. Dad came to me then, wrapped his arms around me, and that's when I finally broke. I sobbed into his shoulder while he held me, while Mom cried behind us, while the turkey went cold on the table and the candles burned down and the sun set outside the windows. I cried for the life I thought I had. I cried for the trust I'd given so freely. I cried for the future I'd imagined. The children I'd wanted. The family that had been stolen from me. I cried for the years of being good, of being patient, of being understanding, of putting everyone else first and having it all mean nothing in the end. But I didn't cry for long. Because beneath the grief, beneath the shock, beneath the pain, something else was growing. Something that felt like anger but clearer, stronger, more focused. Something that felt like clarity. Something that felt impossibly like freedom. The night after Thanksgiving, I didn't sleep. How could I? My bed smelled like David. My house was full of memories of him. My entire life was built around a man who'd spent 6 months betraying me. I lay in the dark and watched the ceiling and let my mind work through everything I'd been too shocked to process earlier. 6 months. He'd been sleeping with my sister for 6 months, coming home to me after being with her, kissing me while thinking about her, making love to me while planning a future with her. 6 months of looking me in the eye and lying with every word, every gesture, every moment. And Amber, my sister, the person I'd protected and helped and supported through every crisis, every failure, every moment of her chaotic life. She'd taken the one thing that was truly mine, the one part of my life that was supposed to be safe from her constant need for attention. She'd seduced my husband, gotten pregnant with his baby, and announced it like she'd won some kind of prize. The rage that filled me then was cold and clean and absolute. Not the hot, explosive anger of the moment when she'd spoken, but something deeper. Something that settled into my bones and crystallized into certainty. I was done. Done being the good sister, the responsible one, the woman who sacrificed her own needs for everyone else. Done making excuses for other people's cruelty. Done being small and accommodating and grateful for scraps of affection. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. David still hadn't come home, hadn't called, hadn't even texted. He was probably with her, probably comforting her, probably telling her it would all be okay, that I'd understand eventually, that we'd all figure it out like adults. I went to his closet and started pulling out his clothes. Suits, shirts, ties, shoes, everything. I carried them downstairs in armfuls and threw them on the front lawn. Trip after trip, emptying his side of the closet, reclaiming that space as my own. His expensive watches, his cufflinks, his cologne. Everything that smelled like him. Everything that reminded me of the life we'd shared. Out on the lawn in piles, getting damp from the November night. When his closet was empty, I went through the house removing every trace of him. Photos off the walls, his books off the shelves, his favorite mug, his running shoes, the fancy coffee maker he'd insisted we needed. Everything. By the time the sun started to rise, the lawn looked like a yard sale, and the house looked like I'd never been married at all. I took a photo of the lawn, posted it on social media with a simple caption, "Free stuff, cheaters' belongings, take what you want." I tagged David. I tagged Amber. I tagged everyone we knew mutually, every friend who'd been to our dinner parties, every family member who'd celebrated our wedding. Within an hour, I had 200 comments. Within 2 hours, David called. "What the hell are you doing?" He sounded panicked, angry, desperate. "Elena, please, we need to talk. We need to figure this out like adults." "Like adults," I repeated. My voice was still that strange, calm thing that didn't sound like me. "You want to talk about being adults? You fucked my sister for 6 months and got her pregnant. You lied to me every single day. You came home and kissed me and made love to me and planned a future with me while you were planning a completely different future with her. And now you want to talk like adults?" "I'm sorry." He was crying. I could hear it in his voice. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to happen." "It didn't just happen, David. You made choices. Every day for 6 months, you made choices. You chose her. You chose to betray me. And now you get to live with those choices." "Please," he said. "Can we just talk? Face to face? I need to explain. I need you to understand." "There's nothing to understand. I want a divorce. I want you out of my life. I want you to sign whatever papers I send you and disappear. You and Amber can have each other. You can build your little family together. And I hope every time you look at that baby, you remember what you destroyed to create it." I hung up, blocked his number, blocked Amber's number, blocked them both on every social media platform, cut them out of my life as cleanly as I'd cut David's clothes out of my closet. Mom called next, then Dad, then my aunt, then my cousin, then friends I hadn't talked to in months. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay, if I needed anything, if there was anything they could do. The post had spread beyond my immediate circle. People were sharing it, commenting, sending messages of support. The story was spreading like wildfire through our social circles, through our town, through every network we'd been part of. David's coworkers saw it. His boss saw it. Amber's friends saw it. The people at the fitness studio where she worked saw it. There was no putting this back in the box. No quiet divorce. No private family drama. I'd made it public, made it permanent, made it impossible for them to control the narrative. And I felt no guilt about it. None. They'd humiliated me in the worst way possible, and I was simply returning the favor. They wanted honesty? Fine. Here was honesty. Here was the truth laid bare for everyone to see. The neighbors started coming by around 10 in the morning. Some took clothes, some just wanted to offer support. Some wanted to hear the story firsthand. I let them take whatever they wanted. Watched David's favorite leather jacket disappear into a teenager's arms. Watched his golf clubs get loaded into someone's trunk. Watched every piece of him get distributed across the neighborhood until there was nothing left but empty lawn and the satisfaction of knowing he'd have to start over from nothing, just like I was doing. By noon, the lawn was empty. By evening, a lawyer had called me. She'd seen the post. She specialized in divorces, and she'd be honored to represent me pro bono because what my husband had done was unconscionable. By the end of the week, David had been served with divorce papers at his office, in front of his colleagues, as publicly humiliating as I could make it. Amber tried to reach out through Mom. Sent messages asking if we could talk, if I could forgive her, if we could find a way to be a family again. Mom, to her credit, told her to leave me alone. Told her she'd made her choice and she'd have to live with it. Dad refused to speak to her at all. The family that had always protected her, always made excuses for her, always loved her despite everything, had finally withdrawn that support. She was alone with David and the consequences of their choices, and I was alone with myself for the first time in my adult life. Alone in my house with empty spaces where David's things had been, with empty frames where our photos had hung. Alone with no husband, no sister, no carefully constructed life to maintain. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I didn't stay alone for long, though. Not because I found someone new, but because I found myself. The self I'd buried under years of being good, of trying to be perfect, of molding myself into what I thought everyone else needed me to be. I quit cooking elaborate meals and started ordering takeout whenever I wanted. I stopped cleaning obsessively and let dishes sit in the sink overnight. I took up painting even though I had no talent for it, covering canvases with violent slashes of color that felt like screaming without making a sound. I cut my hair short, dyed it red, bought clothes that I liked instead of clothes that were appropriate. I started going to therapy, working through years of people-pleasing and putting others first and trying to earn love by being indispensable. I sold the house. Couldn't stay there anymore, in that space we'd shared, with all those memories haunting every room. I moved to a small apartment downtown, exposed brick and big windows and no room for anyone but me. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. Started saying yes to things that scared me. Started building a life that was mine. Only mine, with no one else to consider or accommodate or sacrifice for. The divorce was finalized in February. David didn't contest anything. Gave me everything I asked for. Probably because he knew his reputation was already destroyed and fighting would only make it worse. I took half of everything we'd built together and used it to build something new. Something that belonged only to me. I heard through mutual friends that Amber had the baby in May. A girl. They named her something pretentious and trendy. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Not anger, not sadness, not even curiosity. She was a stranger's baby, born to strangers I used to know. Nothing to do with me anymore. Mom tried to get me to reconcile, to meet the baby, to forgive Amber because she's still my sister, because family is forever, because holding on to anger would only hurt me in the end. I told her no. told her gently but firmly that some betrayals can't be forgiven, that some relationships can't be repaired, that family isn't forever if family destroys you. Dad understood. He came to my new apartment with wine and takeout Chinese and sat with me on my balcony watching the city lights. He apologized for all the times he'd made excuses for Amber, for all the times he'd expected me to be understanding because I was the older sister, the responsible one. He said he was proud of me for walking away, for choosing myself, for refusing to keep playing a role that was killing me slowly. It's been a year now since that Thanksgiving dinner. A year since the moment everything broke. A year since I learned the hardest lesson I've ever had to learn. That being good, being kind, being patient and understanding and selfless doesn't protect you from being destroyed by people who love themselves more than they love you. I'm 33 now, divorced, estranged from my sister, living alone in a city apartment with paint-stained clothes and bad haircut choices, and a life that looks nothing like the one I'd planned. I'm not perfect anymore. I'm not the good girl, the reliable one, the woman who sacrifices herself for everyone else's happiness. I'm messy and angry and still figuring out who I am without all those roles I used to play. And I've never been happier. Last week, I went on a date, a real one, with a man I met at an art gallery who didn't know anything about my past, who looked at me like I was someone worth knowing just as I am. We talked for hours over coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into drinks. He walked me home and kissed me goodnight on my doorstep, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, possibility, the sense that there's a future ahead of me that's bigger and brighter than the past I left behind. I don't know if it'll go anywhere. I don't know if I'm ready for anything serious, if I'll ever be able to trust someone that completely again. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to risk getting hurt again because the alternative is closing myself off, staying safe, staying small, staying in the ruins of what was instead of building what could be. Sometimes I still think about that dinner. About the moment Amber spoke those words and everything shattered. About the 5 seconds of silence before Dad threw his glass. About the way David couldn't look at me. About the wine-soaked tablecloth and the cold turkey and the wreckage of all my careful plans. And I think about the woman I was then. The one who measured her worth by how well she took care of everyone else. The one who believed that if she was just good enough, perfect enough, selfless enough, she'd be safe. The one who thought stability meant never rocking the boat, never making waves, never demanding more than scraps of attention and affection. That woman is gone. She died that Thanksgiving, murdered by the people she loved most. And from her ashes, someone new emerged. Someone harder, maybe. Definitely angrier. But also braver. More honest. More herself. I don't talk to Amber anymore. I don't hate her, which surprises me sometimes. I don't hate David either. What I feel is more like indifference. The kind of blank space where intense emotion used to be. They made their choices. They're living with the consequences. David's reputation never recovered. The story spread too far, too fast. He changed jobs, moved to a different town, but these things follow you in the age of social media. Amber lost most of her friends. The family she thought she'd have with David turned out to be complicated and messy, built on a foundation of betrayal that doesn't make for solid ground. They have each other, I suppose. And their daughter. And whatever happiness they can salvage from the ruins of what they destroyed. I hope it was worth it. I hope when they look at each other across their dinner table, they remember the price they paid. I hope they think of me sometimes, wonder if I'm okay, feel the weight of what they did. But mostly, I hope they don't think of me at all. Because I've stopped thinking of them. My therapist says that's progress. That forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. That healing doesn't require maintaining relationships with people who hurt you. That sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away and never look back. I'm learning that she's right. I'm learning that I don't owe anyone my pain, my suffering, my endless capacity to understand and forgive and make excuses. I'm learning that I deserve better than scraps. Better than being an afterthought. Better than being the supporting character in someone else's story. I started a new job in March, working for a nonprofit that helps women rebuild their lives after divorce. I'm good at it. All those years of being the responsible one, the organized one, the one who held everything together, turned out to be actual skills, not just personality defects. I help other women navigate the legal system, find housing, start over. I see myself in their faces sometimes, that same shell-shocked expression I wore for months after Thanksgiving. That same disbelief that the life they'd built could disappear so completely. I tell them what I wish someone had told me, that it gets better, that the grief doesn't last forever, that on the other side of devastation is a kind of freedom most people never experience, because they never had to lose everything to find themselves. Some of them believe me, some don't. But they all see that I survived, that I'm standing here whole and functional and even happy sometimes, and that gives them hope. It gives me purpose. It makes the pain mean something beyond just pain. Mom and I have coffee every Sunday now. We don't talk about Amber unless I bring it up, which I rarely do. We talk about my work, her book club, Dad's golf game, the normal rhythms of life that continue despite everything. She's different now too, I think. Less focused on keeping everyone happy, less desperate to maintain family harmony at any cost. She tells me sometimes that she's proud of me, that she admires my strength, that she wishes she'd been braver when she was my age. I don't know what she means by that. Don't know what she's comparing her life to. But I appreciate it anyway. This new honesty between us, this acknowledgement that the old rules don't apply anymore. Dad took me to dinner last month for my birthday. Just the two of us, at a steakhouse he loves. He gave me a card with a check inside and a note that said, "For your new life, build something beautiful." I cried in the restaurant right there at the table, and he held my hand and didn't try to make me stop. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had been said in that moment when he threw his wine glass, when he chose me, when he stopped making excuses for the daughter who'd always been his favorite. I used the money to take a trip to Italy in June. Solo travel, something I'd never done before. 2 weeks wandering through Florence and Rome and the Amalfi Coast with no itinerary, no plan, no one to consider but myself. I ate gelato for breakfast. I got lost in medieval streets and didn't panic. I struck up conversations with strangers in broken Italian and decent English. I watched sunsets over the Mediterranean and felt something crack open inside me, something that had been clenched tight for years. On my last night in Positano, I sat on a terrace overlooking the sea and wrote a letter to the woman I used to be. Thanked her for trying so hard, for caring so much, for building a life with such dedication even if it didn't last. Told her I was sorry for all the ways she diminished herself, for all the times she accepted less than she deserved, for all the years she spent being good instead of being whole. And then I told her goodbye. Told her she could rest now, that I'd take it from here, that I'd build something better with the rubble she left behind. I burned the letter on the beach at midnight, watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash, carrying away the last remnants of who I used to be. The smoke rose into the darkness, disappearing into stars that have watched a million heartbreaks and a million new beginnings. I felt lighter afterward, cleaner, like I'd performed some ancient ritual of death and rebirth, like I'd closed a door that needed closing. When I came home, I started dating again. Not seriously, not looking for anything permanent. Just exploring, experimenting, figuring out what I actually want instead of what I thought I was supposed to want. I went out with a teacher who talked too much about his ex-wife, a lawyer who was charming but commitment-phobic, a musician who was sweet but directionless, the guy from the art gallery, Michael, who I'm still seeing, who makes me laugh and doesn't push for more than I'm ready to give. I'm not in love with him. I'm not sure I'm capable of that kind of trust anymore, that kind of complete vulnerability. But I like him. I like the way he looks at my paintings and sees something worth commenting on. I like the way he texts good morning without expecting anything in return. I like that he has his own life, his own friends, his own interests, and doesn't need me to complete him. Maybe that's what healthy looks like. Not two halves making a whole, but two whole people choosing to share space. Not needing each other, but wanting each other. Not building your entire identity around being someone's wife, someone's sister, someone's anything, but being fully yourself and letting someone else be fully themselves alongside you. I don't know if it'll last. I don't know if anything lasts. But I'm okay with that uncertainty now. I've learned that permanence is an illusion, that stability is just another word for stagnation, that sometimes the best thing that can happen is for everything to fall apart so you can rebuild it better. Last week, I ran into someone David used to work with. He recognized me, came over to say hello, asked how I was doing. I could see the curiosity in his eyes, the gossip he'd heard, the story everyone knew. I could have been embarrassed. Could have made an excuse and left. Could have reverted to the old Elena who would have smiled and said everything was fine and changed the subject. Instead, I told him the truth. Told him I was better than I'd been in years. Told him getting divorced was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even if it didn't feel like it at the time. Told him I'd built a whole new life and I liked this one better than the old one. He looked surprised, maybe even disappointed that I wasn't broken, wasn't tragic, wasn't the victim he'd expected me to be. People love a good tragedy, but they don't know what to do with resurrection. They don't know how to process a woman who turns betrayal into empowerment, who takes devastation and builds something new from the wreckage. But that's their problem, not mine. I'm done living for other people's expectations. Done trying to fit into boxes that were always too small. Done being the good girl who colors inside the lines and never makes waves and accepts whatever crumbs of affection are thrown her way. The woman I am now is messy and complicated and still figuring things out. She gets angry sometimes, holds grudges, sets boundaries that she refuses to compromise. She's selfish in ways the old Elena never allowed herself to be. She puts herself first. She walks away from people who don't treat her well. She demands respect instead of hoping for it. And she's happy. Not constantly. Not without struggle. Not without bad days and moments of grief that still ambush her sometimes. But genuinely, fundamentally happy in a way the old Elena never was. Even in her most perfect moments. Because this happiness isn't built on anyone else. Isn't dependent on being loved or needed or validated by someone else. It's built on the solid foundation of knowing herself, liking herself, being herself without apology or compromise. It's the happiness of freedom, the happiness of authenticity. The happiness of a woman who looked into the abyss of her own destruction and decided to build herself back better, stronger, more herself than she'd ever been allowed to be before. Sometimes I think about that Thanksgiving dinner and I'm almost grateful. Not for the betrayal itself, not for the pain, but for what it forced me to become. For the way it burned away everything that wasn't essential, everything that wasn't truly me, until all that was left was the core of who I actually am beneath all the roles and expectations and performances. I'm grateful to the woman who poured wine over her sister's head, who threw her husband's belongings on the lawn, who made the betrayal public instead of suffering in silence. She was braver than she knew. She saved my life by destroying the one that was killing me slowly. Amber sent me a message last month through a mutual friend. Said she wanted to talk, wanted to apologize properly, wanted to try to repair our relationship. Said her daughter deserved to know her aunt. Said family should be able to forgive and move forward. I didn't respond. Not because I'm still angry, but because I have nothing to say to her. Nothing to gain from that conversation. She wants absolution, wants to feel better about what she did, wants to pretend we can go back to being sisters like none of this happened. But we can't. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some relationships, once broken, aren't worth the effort of repair. And I'm done doing emotional labor for people who destroyed me. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me unforgiving. Maybe it makes me the kind of person I never thought I'd become. The kind who cuts people out of her life without looking back. But I'm alive in a way I wasn't before. Present in my own life instead of watching it from the sidelines. Building something real instead of maintaining something hollow. And if that requires being cold sometimes, being unforgiving sometimes, being the kind of woman who protects herself first, then so be it. I'd rather be whole than nice. I'd rather be honest than accommodating. I'd rather be alone than with people who treat me as expendable. The scars are still there. I still have moments when I remember the life I thought I'd have, the future I'd imagined, the innocence I can never get back. I still have days when I'm angry at how much time I wasted trying to be perfect for someone who didn't deserve it. I still have nights when I lie awake wondering if I'll ever be able to fully trust anyone again. But those moments are getting fewer. The scars are fading. And in their place is something tougher, something resilient, something that knows how to survive and rebuild and keep going even when everything falls apart. I'm not the woman I was. I'm better, stronger, freer, more myself. And if you'd told me a year ago, sitting at that Thanksgiving table with my perfect meal and my perfect life and my complete ignorance of what was coming, that this is where I'd end up, I wouldn't have believed you. Would have thought it sounded like a nightmare, a cautionary tale, the worst thing that could possibly happen. But I would have been wrong. Because the worst thing that could have happened would have been never knowing, never finding out. Spending the rest of my life in that marriage, with that man, building a life on foundations of lies and betrayal, slowly dying inside while pretending everything was fine. The explosion was violent and devastating, and it destroyed everything I thought I knew. But it also set me free. And standing here now in my messy apartment with my new life and my complicated feelings and my hard-won independence, I can say something I never thought I'd be able to say. I'm glad it happened. I'm glad my sister opened her mouth at Thanksgiving dinner. I'm glad she said those words that shattered my world. I'm glad my father threw his glass. I'm glad the silence lasted only 5 seconds before everything exploded. Because that explosion was the beginning, not the end. The end of a life I'd outgrown without realizing it. The beginning of the life I was always meant to have, if only I'd been brave enough to claim it. I'm brave enough now, and I'm just getting started.